Good morning. Well, actually, good afternoon. Good afternoon.
A little later.
A little later. So I'm so excited to have this coffee chat with a mom because we're going to be talking about unconditional love. And here we have Yvette Cervantes. Do you want to tell people a little bit about who you are before we jump into this conversation?
Let's see. Mom of 5. I'm a surrogate for 4, so 9 kids total.
All right.
Plus pets and all the other family members that come along with being in this community. Mm-hmm. You start off with so many, and then you just like multiply and add and add and add and add. So like figuring out like how many kids really. Super hard, but also worth it. And all so many stories. So we've been involved. I have a kid who's non-binary, and they came out probably about at 17, 18. Wasn't a great relationship in the beginning with the two of us. And it was never one of those, like, not love there, not compassion, it was really, really, and I think I've said this before, is fear. I mean, I was so afraid because, I have this kid who, ever since they were little, whatever they did big. Nothing was ever small. So it's like, okay, they're out now. I work at a Christian place. We go to church, and it's like, holy, like, what am I going to do? And I know this child is just going to go from 1 to like 25, and then to like 100 from there. So it was scary. It was really scary. But luckily, I had some amazing friends who I was telling you earlier about the wedding. Like, they went into that place and bought this stuff. Well, that was one of Britt's teachers and actually a coach for Britt. And so this amazing couple was there for Britt. Well, Britt lived with my brother for about a year. And we were able to kind of go through, and then it was like, okay, it's time for you to come home. And then from there, we knew that, I guess, a family, the only way to really get things to go anywhere and do anything was to jump in. Like, kind of like what they did. And so I think being a mom, whatever they've always wanted to do. So it was like lacrosse. It was soccer for Brianna. It's whatever it is we do as a family. And so like being part of the LGBTQIA community now, it was family. Like, and there was no ifs, ands, buts. Like you said, that it was unconditional. It's like, this is our life now. This is what we do. This is who we are. And so it's been a long journey, and I think there's so much more to go. So
I'm like getting chills right here. that journey, that word is like, because I obviously know my experience is different, but I had an experience with my own mother and my family with me coming out and what all that entails. So this is going to be, I'm really thankful for you to sit here with us. Like, I feel you are like a mom. Like, you are like when you were like, yes, I have these children, but then, what's going to be special about this conversation is that you are not just a mother to the folks, like your immediate family, but the chosen family, the folks that come to you and you with open arms. Like, it's really special to have you here and recognize you as that person in the community. So thank you, Yvette.
Well, thank you. And it's funny because like I feel I get so much more out of it. Like, knowing and being in these people's lives, that like seeing them grow, seeing them graduate from college, getting new jobs, getting hurt, like whatever it is, it's one of those things where you're that first phone call. I have some of the kids that I still call them kids. They're probably in their 40s. But it's one of those things where it's like, they're still children. They're still younger. Even if they were older, they're still children. But it was like, it's, I'll text my kids and I'll text them, like, hey, this is happening or whatever the situation is. And it's getting those responses. Sometimes I laugh because I'm like, I'll get responses from my chosen children before I get my own. And I'm like, what's up with this?
Amazing.
So, but it's those stories, and it's like, and it's so cool to be able to see them succeed. To come from this place where their parents chose not to be there. And so it was like, okay, I reap the rewards now. Because like now you have this child that's amazing and doing so many things and helping the community and giving back, and you're not there to see it. And I've had some where they've like become strong leaders and big community driven people, and their parents are like, oh, well, now you have a name. So like now Like now, now I'll have you back, but on my rules. And I'm like, so conditions. Like conditions. And you can't love your child that way. Yeah. And it's like, I'll love you and I'll respect you, but I'm not going to call you by who you are. I'm going to call you by who I am. And it's like, then you know what? And it's been those conversations that are hard where it's like, you don't want to tell a kid like, hey, you don't want to, like, that's your mom, but I'm here instead. Like, no, it's like, that's your mom. And if you have, again, a choice, and it's like, do you want to live with under these conditions? Or are you going to be free and just away from all that drama? So I think that's been such a big part of like everything we do. And I couldn't even imagine like not having so many people around. Like, it's just one of those like, okay.
So whatever. I don't know why this comes to mind, but I'm like, you talk about imagining things, and I'm like, I'm trying to think. Let's go back to when you became a mother. Well, the first time you became a mother, right? If you think about that version of Yvette and like where you are today, like what do you decipher? Like what going into motherhood when you first, were doing it? What was motherhood? What did it look like? And now what have you learned about it?
I think it's interesting because it's like when I had my first, who's like, in his 30s now, it was like instinctual that you became protective, and I think that was like with my second coming out, it was protective. To me, I say fear, but I think it was like that protection that you get. And I think parents have to understand that, like, as a parent, you should never have conditions. As a parent, I mean, there's, like, don't get me wrong, like, you can't stay out till 5 o'clock in the morning with somebody, don't you? That's a condition. And it's something you got to respect. But they earn respect, and they earn with what they do. And so I think having a child and having to, like, take care of this child and feed it and bathe it, get it to the doctors, because they can't do anything by themselves. They cry, and you have no idea why. You start to learn and adapt. You see the signs, you see the signals. When they cry and what it means. And so as they grow up, it's hard because sometimes you can kind of still see it and you think that you know what's wrong and you think you got it all under control, and then they change on you. And you're like, well, I thought you really dressed like this. You don't like this anymore? Like, I just spent all this money on clothes? And they're like, well, no. And so it's hard. And I think as like somebody once told me, little kids, little problems, big kids, big problems. Little kids, less money, big kids, more money. Right. And so a lot of that's true. And so you run into situations where you can't protect them, and you worry and you stress. And having kids in this community, and especially now, it's insane. So it's like, you want to live and you want to like have that, like, okay, like you can go to the bathroom, but okay, go with your brother, go with your sister, like go and protect and always be there if there's somebody, even if you don't have to go. They always laugh like, girls always go to the bathroom together, or people always go to the bathroom. Right. But I think it becomes like even more so. Yep. Because now as that mom who had to protect and had to like feed and shelter and change, I have to relive that in a sense with this community that we're in, because you go and you hear things and, like Britt will come up and they'll be like, so don't get worried. Right. Or like, don't freak out. Or like, I'm like, whoa, that's a great way to start. Start it this way. Right. It's fine. It's all taken care of. And as an adult, like an adult dealing with an adult, that's hard. Like, I think so raising parents or raising kids in this like year in this like community now is tough. It's really, really hard. And as a parent, I can't even imagine these parents who hear all of these stories that are going on and hear the hate and the suicidal rates and all these kids and little young ones that are doing what they're doing because they're so afraid and not being able and not wanting to step in. Like, and not willing to like step in like for your child. It's like, okay, maybe this isn't what you wanted and it wasn't what you expected, and you expected one thing in your life and your child totally pulled the rug and changed it. Yeah. But you can still have a relationship. And you should still, like, I don't know any parent, and, I do give props, like, if a parent is struggling with their own issues and their own, like, mental health things, and they need to step away, I respect that. Yeah. But if a parent steps away from a child who's having mental issues and having stress and learning who they are and having dysphoria, I have little respect for that. And I'm sorry. I mean, it's just, you're given a gift. And people, like, I was a surrogate. I know how it was in those moms who can't have that gift. So you have a gift, you've gotten it. There should be no conditions to being able to just love your kid. And so it's hard. I think it's a little tough.
Let's talk about that fear to kind of start, like, you know, seeing this all around, right? You talk about this fear. I know that my mother also had her fear, right? Of like, my daughter's coming out. Like, what does this mean? Like, how is the world going to see her, understand her, and all this stuff? And you mentioned you had fear when
absolutely.
Britt first came out, and there was some time for you to process. What helped you as a parent process and be the champion that you are today? What was it? What do you think helped you?
I think education.
Okay.
Like, you know, like
education, y'all.
Yeah, education,
Yes.
books, talking to other parents. And I think one of the biggest things for me now is, you know, we have friends throughout like different areas, and I'll get a phone call or a text, and they're like, "Hey, Mom, I have a parent whose kid's coming out or just came out, and they don't know what to do. Can you talk to them?" Sure. And it's like, I didn't have that. I didn't even know what it meant to be trans when, you know, at all. It's like, you know, Cheryl was like, "Hey." I'm like, "Okay." But not knowing and not understanding is scary. Especially now for parents now in this like age where you're under attack constantly.
What made you? I always like to really dissect the moments between the big steps in people's journeys. For you, what do you think helped you even want to reach out to help? Because I know, like, again, my mother, she probably could have reached out to try to figure out something, but I think she was just so afraid of it herself that the idea of, and same with me, honestly, like when I was a teenager, like I was so afraid of anyone knowing, or me even finding education to help myself, because you're so afraid of what it is that you can't even like make the step towards education. So what do you think helped you kind of like even make you even realize, like, I do need to figure this out? Like, what was it that motivator? Was it?
I think losing your child.
Okay.
You know, like losing your child.
That'll do it.
You know, you hear all the suicides. I still have friends who will talk, and you don't see the signals. Like I said, when you're little, you know that they need a diaper change. You know they need food. But when you're struggling mentally and you're going through these dysphorias and this uncertainty, they could be smiling and laughing, and then the next day they're gone. And so hearing all of those stories and understanding and knowing my kid was in that place, it was like, I have a choice. I have the decision to make that I either educate myself to help them and help them understand that this is what we need to be doing. You know, we were really fortunate. My kid found the LGBTQ center in Orange County and started going. And so it was like, okay, you're going, I'm going. You know, we're going to do this together. And then it was like a couple more kids, and then like 3 or 4 of us were going on.
Can we take a moment to acknowledge that? Because I don't think,
it's not normal.
I mean, it
should be normal.
I mean, it should be normal, but like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Like, Yvette, like, for you to be like, I'm going to go with you. Like, I'm going to be actively, like, that is huge. And I think, and I want to spotlight this for anyone who is watching, any parent who's out there, like, just showing up with someone, like showing up with your kid and being like, I'm here with you. Like, that is massive to the emotional and mental.
But I think it's
journey.
I think it's like your kid decides to become a dancer and you go to all their dance practices. They decide to play softball or, you know, football, and you go and you do all of that.
Yeah.
It's such an easy thing to do. And parents are like, yeah, my kid plays softball. You know, my kid's a football player. My kid does that. And, like, you're surrounded with, like, acceptance.
Right.
And then you're like, my kid's, you know, transgender. And they're like, oh. You're like,
yes.
Yes, that's what the reality is. And, you know, and they're like, well, you do a lot of events or you go to this stuff. But I'm like, you go to football. You go watch your kid play baseball. You support. So I support my kid with that. And so I think realistically, there should be no difference.
Right.
You know, and I'm not saying that being, you know, LGBT is part of being a sport.
Correct, yeah.
But it's that same concept of you support your child in whatever they do.
Yes.
And you may not have ever known how to play baseball, and your kid picked it up. You read, you watch TV, you understand, you listen. It is the same thing when your kid comes out.
Yeah.
I think you just have to understand that it's a journey. You know, when Britt came out and there was that fear initially, when they came back home and I'm still working, I was afraid to lose my job, because I did work where my boss was the elder of our church. He's the owner of the company.
Okay.
And so and then I had the little comments of like, oh, I heard your kid's out. And they're looking a little masculine. Yeah. And so I was like, oh, okay. Walking down the hallway, like trying to avoid contact.
Wow.
And so it was really tough. And we had gone to the church and kind of got ousted by the church. Somebody somehow found out. And I would like literally be going at a grocery store and they'd like turn into another row.
Wow.
Like just to avoid contact.
Wow.
We'd be at church and you're supposed to be like, shake your neighbor's
Supposed
hand.
to, right? Supposed to.
No, we had leprosy. We had whatever. Like people and it was like one of those things where if my kid's not accepted there, I'm not going to be accepted. If my kid's not comfortable there, then I'm not going to go. So of course that came into work conversations of you didn't go to church. You didn't go, oh, it's been a month now. It's been 2. And so it went from 2 months to a year to finally having this conversation with my boss about it and understanding. And it was like, you could be in the community and still be a Christian. You could still be, you could be Jewish. You could be anything you want.
Yeah.
And because you don't lose that because of who you are. Yeah. And you wouldn't lose it for anything else. Why should you lose it for being yourself?
Yeah.
And so I think...
yes, I agree completely.
So it was like one of those things like... It has to be accepted. It has to be real. And as parents, I knew for me, it was like, just like when my son played football, I had to learn the sport.
Right.
And when my second kid came out, the second oldest, it was either learn it, accept it, understand it, educate myself with it, or I'm not going to have them in my life. And... I love this kid more than life. And so not having them in my life, I couldn't imagine. So it was like, okay, do you do that or do the other?
It's that, it's that love. Like, what helps you? I know this sounds like, we're talking about unconditional love, but the reality is like there are a lot of parents that really struggle to be there for their children, and then the domino effect there is that the children don't have their parent, right? The person who's going to be there to protect them. So when you're tapping into this love, right? I can see it in your eyes. This love. You're like, it's like, how did you said there was the time when Britt left, and you had to kind of like you realized what you would be losing.
Right.
What helped continue for you to tap into that place of love instead of from the place of fear and confusion? And how did you continue to like motivate yourself in that space?
Like I said, like so Brett lived with my brother, so I kind of knew what was going on from my brother's understanding. My girlfriend, the couple that I adore still, they would be at school, so I would get feedback from what was going on at school. And so I saw this kid who was struggling and who was not getting a lot of acceptance at school and having horrible times at school. So it was like, how do I say I'm a mom and see this and watch this? Like, how can you sit there realistically and see your kid in pain? And so there was those things of like, okay, this has to stop. Like living with my brother and working with my brother, they're making money, they have a new car, they're happy. But are they like truly happy? And then hearing from my girlfriend what was going on, it was one of those like, and that she was the fun, like she was, I love her to death. She was like, Brett needs to come home. Like this needs to happen. And the kind of some of experiences of their own as, a couple, they're like, this is, like here's what needs to happen. And so it was one of those little tough love nudges from a total place of love from this couple. And so that was really helpful. And so I think education, understanding from their point of what's going on. And so I think like for me now, my biggest goal is like to give that back, like to talk to parents, like they're like, can you do a panel? I'm like, absolutely. Like whatever we need to do, we need to educate.
Well, funny story. That's actually how we met.
Right.
Is because you were doing just that. I mean, think about the universe, like, and we do talk candidly about Anna's journey. And so that day that we went to the convening, we went to a family panel, because Anna was trying to work the courage to tell her parents about her identity and us, and you were on the panel, and I was just like, whoa, like, whoa. Because even for me, like, you know, my parents, you know, it's been a journey, but they never, you know, at that point, it was not like that. And like, sort of such affirming, that's the word, you give such affirming love. And because I think a lot of people think, oh, like, your parent loves and accepts you, doesn't kick you out of the house. But it's like, it's not just that, but it's like being in the same space and being like, unconditionally loving who you are just as you are is powerful.
We laugh because we're like, if Brit never came out, we'd have no social skills. Like, we'd have no friends. Like, everybody that we love is our tribe. It's our community. And so, you know, we have all the stuff that we do because of that. And so that's kind of like the joke. And that Pamela, like I said, I wasn't supposed to. She was just like, can you do this? And I think that thought process with anybody is like when I said I get a text or a call, and sometimes I'm exhausted. And I've had a couple moms who I'm like, oh my God, this is just trying. And it's like, oh my gosh, every time. But then I understand being on that other side of not having, I was always fortunate that, you know, we have a lot of family in the community. We have friends in the community. Yeah. So it was like I grew up with that in the community, not knowing. Yeah. You know, I grew up with a stepsister and their partner. And we never, like, it was not even like, it was so funny because, like, we didn't even know. We're like, oh, we're going to their house. Like, they were, like, the pool house. And they had a pool that, like, you picked up this thing and you, like, slid from the jacuzzi inside the house into the pool. Okay. And it was, like, the cool house to go to. And it was, like, they had all these cars and they went on these trips and we always heard these stories. Mm. But I never realized. Mm. I mean, growing up, I had no clue. Mm. And then it was like, oh, like, I see. Yeah, that makes sense. Let's see. But it was like, you didn't know, and you didn't know any different. And I think that, like, instilling with my, like, we lived next to my grandfather. And so my grandfather was, like, a translator for the courts. And he was really huge in civil rights. What? And oh, my God, he was amazing. So he did all of, like, their Cinco de Mayo celebrations and all the independence. Oh, wow. It was everything that had to do with the courts, like, that was with our ancestry, he like helped with all those programs. So I think we have like photos. I think my mom still has them, like news clipping when we were little, like at these events with him. And so he had told me when I was little, you know, and you're going through this and my kids laugh because they're like, well, you're kind of passing, like, you know, like you know, you don't have that. And I was like, I'm still Mexican, like I'm still Hispanic. What are you talking about? And so he had said to me, and it's one of those things I still keep, is like, no one's better than you. Mm. And not only that, but you're not better than anyone else. Mm. So flip it all the way. And it was like, okay. And it was one of those things like, okay, like, so I never took my passing as a privilege. Mm. You know, I never took in somebody else's, you know, wealth or whatever as something that made me less of a person. Yeah. And I think like in this community, more of our kids and more of our adults need to keep understanding that they should be whoever they're supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And no one can take that, and no one's going to be better than them. And I always laugh because I'm like, people don't like trans people because they're prettier. They just love that look in them most.
Well, there's somebody, I don't know who told me, they're like, you know, people are afraid to see people being so free to be themselves, and that instead of, you know, being afraid of that, you should be inspired, hopefully, by that. Right. That's the idea, is to be inspired by the community and being like, wow, like, they're so free, like, maybe I should be free. And whatever that looks like for you. And, you know, it's so funny that you say that story about your grandfather with the advice, because when if I think about Yvette Cervantes, like, you were, like, all giving. Like, you were like, what can we do? Like, you, like, get in there and you're like, what can I do to help the community? What can I do selflessly? And I'm just like, and you know, it's very rare that you meet people like you that are doing that, and you're just like, what, like, motivates you? Like, seriously, what is it? And that story about your grandfather, what he told you, gives me a little bit of insight there for sure. But what do you think it is about your experience and your story that motivates you to be that kind of person?
I think, like, a lot of it does have to do with my grandpa. And I think seeing what he did and what he overcome. I mean, he grew up in Mexico. He studied to be a priest. And the weekend before he was supposed to take his vows, he met my grandma.
Oh my God.
To talk about, like, everything. And so to us, it's like,
wow.
God not really placed us in certain situations with certain people, we wouldn't all be here. And so to me, it's like when I meet somebody who's needing to me, it's like, okay, you gave me, okay. Like, I'll whatever I need to do, whatever I need to help. Wow. Some are a little bit harder. Wow. The journeys with them that they go through are a little harder. So I think, like I was saying, it was, like, inspiration is my grandfather. He did some amazing things, and, he had cancer. He had, dialysis machines, and he would make everything, even the toughest situations, were funny. Like, we'd be like, he'd have to go to get dialysis, and we're like, where you going? He's like, I have to go get my monkey blood. It's like, so everything was like this joke, and everything was funny. And he made it so that we would go to court with him at, after school. Sometimes we would walk, because my mom worked, and we'd go and we'd walk over and sit with my sister and my brother and I, and sometimes with my sister and I only. And we hear, like, his translating. And it was, to him, it was so important that we spoke Spanish. So, and I hate it now because I don't speak it as much, so it's like you lose it. Yeah. But to him, it was like, never be afraid of who you are. Like, don't let anybody take your identity away from you. It was one of those things where, to me, it's like, God, he needed to be living now. Like, we needed him now because he was so strong.
But guess what?
I know. See, that's what
he lives through you, dude. Look how powerful that is. To me, it's like, dude, living next door to him and being raised. I had a stepdad, but I was raised with my grandfather, like, up until I was 13. Wow. And so he, now thinking, like I said, he's like, no one's better than you. You're not better than anybody. Like, small things, and understanding who we were. Like, really accepting our heritage. Accepting, to me, you take that from, okay, accepting our heritage, okay, accepting who I am, accepting who my children are, accepting other people. And I think that's where I stem from, where it's like, he never, he was older, and, as he got sick, we had to watch that, but he never made us see this, like, man that was meek or weak or anything. It was always this powerful man. And I think his words of, when me being a young kid, just stuck. And it was like, I can't walk into a place and have somebody tell me that I can't be accepted. I can't walk in with friends of ours who, if they want a beard and a dress, they can wear a beard and a dress, because and they look good. And so, I've stood in people where they're like, we'll walk and they'll kind of look, and I'm like, and I look again at whoever's staring, and I'm like, can I help you? Or like, I'm you lost?
Yeah, I'm like, I'm confused. I'm like, about what? Can I help you? Like, would you?
Oh, they literally say that to you?
Yeah, like, I've had an old man tell me, I'm confused. And I'm like, well, let me help you. And I think that's what we have to do.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. I think that's what you have, instead of leaning in by saying, like, being
or not saying anything.
Or not saying anything, right?
Yeah, I think a girlfriend of mine once told us, and it's so funny because you take all these things that you hear from people. It's like, if you sit in a room or wherever you're at, and you hear this horrible conversation going on, and you sit back and you just listen to it, you're part of that conversation. Yeah. I mean, you're not doing anything to stop it. Right. And so I think, with my grandfather, it's like, speak up, say something, be somebody's voice. He was a translator. He was someone's voice. And so now I'm like, okay, that's what we need to do as parents, as allies. Somebody said, you're not an ally, you need to be an accomplice. Oh, yes. And I love that. I love that. And when they said that, it was like, right, and that's true. And that's those things, is like, don't just sit there and listen. Right. Like, be a voice, because as soon as you open your mouth and you say something, normally they're going to be like, oh, well, I and you're like, yeah, I, like, stop. You don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. So I think more of us have to, like, start, number one, educating ourselves and educating others. Because I think once we start educating others, it gives parents and family members and loved ones of people who are out or trying to come out and don't know. Yeah. It gives them a voice, and so, like, as my grandfather, he was a voice in the courts for people who didn't speak English. Wow. We have that opportunity. Yeah. In so many different forms, that we have a voice in media, and, everything we do to help. I mean, we can just help. And so I think that's kind of where I've learned it from, and why it's so important to me to, like, keep that up.
I can totally see that
I'm like,
linkage.
this is like, yeah.
That's so fascinating. Wow. Did your grandfather ever meet your children, or didn't have a chance to? No.
He died when I was 13.
Oh, you died when you were 13. Okay.
So it was tough, but I mean, we lived next door to him for so long.
Wow.
That it was like literally we would walk next door.
Oh, wow.
And so he had this strong voice, and he was always stern with us. But then at the same time, I look back at all the little things he said, and I bring them into my life myself now, and I'm like,
anything else?
okay,
Anything else?
Yeah. And it's funny because like when my mom had me, I didn't get my father's last name. I got my grandfather's.
Oh.
You know, so I was a Samora for a long time until I got married. But to me, it was so important to carry that because I knew what it was to him, because he was like, you have children, leave this one with me. Wow. You know, like type of relationships. Wow. But living next door, we got to be raised by him. We understood religion and the concept of what all that played, but we also learned sticking up for our, like, who we are. And it's just like, you take civil rights and you take LGBT rights, and they so intercross.
Totally.
Yeah, I'm like, so you learn with what you've done that because that's there's history there, and so now you move it in here,
right?
And so as a parent, when you're learning and trying to understand, if you don't have enough information on that, look at your civil rights and what people were taken away, and understand that that's what we have now. You know, I think there's one poem that I love that talks about, and I can't remember the author of it. I have it on my phone. But it's like, they came for this person, but I didn't go because it wasn't that wasn't me. Then they came for this, and I didn't go. And then they came for this next group, and I didn't go. And then they came for me, but there was no one to stand for me. And I'll get it to you, but it's like, have it on my phone. But it's one of those where it's true. I mean, and if you see, like, historically, as they've attacked so many different races and religions, each time it's a new group. And once they feel that they've broken that group, they go to the next. You know, and I was hearing somebody speak one time, and they said, you know, part of the LGBT, you can bend us, you can bend us, you can twist us, but you're never going to break us.
I love that.
And so it's true. And that's what I think as a parent, we are fearful. And it's more of a fear of not being able to protect, you know, and a fear of something happening to our kids because we couldn't be there. And I think, one person at that one that we met, they said, you shouldn't be using the word fear. And I'm like, but you shouldn't be telling me how my feelings are supposed to be. Right. Like, I understand where you're coming from, but you have to understand where I'm coming from. Like, if you're not a parent and you're like, you don't understand that from fear comes wisdom, you know, and it's like, you have to, at one point, it is normal. Like, I laugh because I'm like, you know, our Brits coming out story wasn't rainbows and unicorns. No. It wasn't. It was a harsher reality, but it was one that was never... Love was never a fact of being missing. It was always a fear of, okay, society sucks. Yeah. What are we going to do? Yeah. And so, but we've survived these so far. Yeah. And I think...
How do you feel about the term... Because I always like to, like... I was just talking to someone last night about this, is the dynamic of family, you know, parents and being part of the LGBT community, and how, you know, we on my end, right? It's like, it came from a place of like, hey, I love you and I need you, right? Like, I don't know what to do. I need my mom. I need my dad, you know, and so unfortunately in what we're understanding in our experiences is like in parents trying to protect, sometimes, you know, it doesn't come out, you know, the way that's ideal, right? But I also feel like the context here and what's happening right now is that, you know, we are breaking the generational chains of having to be closeted, right? And so now we're literally coming out, and we're trying to live the best to our ability, right? Openly happy by being who we are. Right. And so that also means that now parents are learning to, instead of just, you know, not talking to children at all, there's reparations, right? Repairing the relationship. And I think that's, when I think about the story with you and Britt, it's like you survived, but you also repaired it. And I think there's a level of love and trust between two people to do that. I know I did that with my family, with my mom. You know, there was a level with my dad. He was not happy with me coming out. And I had to give him his space. And it was hard. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it was an easy, you know, like I said, it's a journey, you know, but I do believe that it was rooted in love. Like somehow we found our way back to each other, my family and I. We knew that like you didn't want to lose your child.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't want to lose my family. And so I ran towards the pain. I moved back home. I moved back to Orange County and I was like, I'm going to be gay and we're going to figure this out. You know, I was like, I don't want to lose my family. And I was privileged enough to have my family, you know, we worked through it together with time, with patience, with disagreements, with agreements, with, you know, conversations.
But that's a relationship.
Oh, think about that.
I mean, think about it. Like, do you, like, in your current relationship, are you guys perfect all the time?
No. Right. Anna will attest to that.
But you love your
But
partner.
we love each other. Yeah.
And right. And that's the importance. And I think that's the whole thing with family.
Oh.
You know, it's like you have to do that because you know how it would be without that person in your life. Mm-hmm. And so you do whatever you need to do to make it work. You know, and so, you know, some people are like, oh, well, we started our journey and it was always perfect. And I'm like, well, that's great for you. Kudos, that's awesome. You know, and I'm happy for you.
Yeah,
and I'm not against that.
Right.
But you can't, like, it's not okay to, like, bash somebody who didn't start off with that.
Of course.
Because, like, to me, it's like, it doesn't matter where you started.
Yeah.
It's like where you end up ultimately.
Yeah.
And, like, your journey together.
Yeah.
So it's like, you may protect your kid and you may, like, be there.
That's a good point.
But, you know, if you're not working, and again, I'm not bashing at any parent. I mean, everybody needs to do what they want to do at their level. But, you know, part of it is being there and going on this with your child.
Yeah.
I mean, even if it's your adult child.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all part of healing together and working together.
Healing and moving forward, even like after, right? Now that, even when you've come to a place of alignment, right? You continue on your journey. And what I mean by that is, I know for me, like I continue on my journey because I've already experienced what I experienced. And so I do seek like therapy and processing and healing of my own, being able to then put aside like the experience with my family. Like now they're on their own, like everyone at the end of the day, like has their own journey and their own things that they need to process and heal. I'm going to get this right here. It's going to make sense. What am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is that even after the point of alignment, whatever work people still have to do to process what's happened is their own responsibility, you know, to heal and better their own well-being. Because I think sometimes, even in my own experience, right, you get bogged down of like, you know, you can't change the past. And so there's, what am I trying to say here?
What is it like when they say when they're like you have to break a few eggs to make a cake?
Ooh.
You know what I mean? Like it's that type of situation. Like
I like that.
Your foundation, you were born and you had your family.
Yes.
You know, but then what built from that is how your family became your home.
Yes.
And so like you're gonna have some nooks, you're gonna have breaks, you're gonna have a plumbing leak, you're gonna have some electrical issues.
Ooh, I like that.
So that's all part of like healing, learning, fixing, becoming.
Ooh.
And so none of us are perfect. But none of us are perfect. I mean, and nothing you build is ever going, no relationship is going to be perfect. No, like friendship, no, nothing that you do is going to be exactly pristine and without flaws. And I think, but that's what makes it beautiful. It's because we all like work through that together. And so I think
I do like that a lot.
But I think that's part of what you're like kind of saying is that you're going to fight. You're going to have arguments.
Yeah.
But if you went through life without doing that, and you hear some of these people are like, "Oh, yeah, we never fight," and I'm like, "Well, then are you
sure
really?
About that?
Yeah, exactly.
Are you really living?
Are you really living? Are you just, like?
I mean, conflict is inevitable for sure. Fight fair. What is it? Fight fair is what I've heard. Just fight fair.
Yeah,
you know,
and I think,
with respect.
But some of your best conversations come out, I think, of disagreements.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like then you start like, oh yeah, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Or
One thing I really appreciate about my mother is, even though we don't, you know, always see eye to eye, because again, she comes from her own, the way she grew up, her, you know, her experience that I respect is like, I always love that she lets me share my side, like try to understand my perspective and hear me out, you know. And there are times where she goes, "Oh, Jackie, okay." And then same with me, you know, with her, it's like, "Oh yeah, like, you know, it's been." And there are times, and I'm just curious, you as a mom, if you've ever experienced this with Britt, is like, I remember there were moments 10 years ago where I would, you know, I remember I would like, I think I liked something on Facebook that was like LGBT rights or something, and my mom was like, "Don't do that, like, do you have to do that? Your aunts are gonna see that." I was like, "Mom," I'm like, "Really?" I'm like, "By you telling me this, I feel like you're not letting me be me." And I thought, didn't you want to, you love me, want me to be happy? And she's like, you're right. So a lot of it, I found at times it was like, when I owned who I was, it was almost like, I don't know if it's like a motherly thing, where it's like, maybe she felt like, okay, she's gonna be okay. Yeah, I don't know. Does that resonate with you as a mom? It does.
And I think like even for me, like as a parent, you like post something. I'm like, oh, I shouldn't post that. Oh, I shouldn't do that. So I think like with that, like I started ending and realistically, when I think now, I'll post, and through posting through this whole journey that we've done. We've lost family members. I've lost friends. And to me, it's kind of like, you know, I really don't want you in my life anyway. Because then, you know, at the end of the day, your relationship that should matter to you is not friends on social media and nothing's wrong with social media. But really those who stick by you. And if that's on social media and those are your friends who support you and do things, I'll put a little post out about collecting clothes for this or doing this. And I will learn those people that sometimes I may not talk to all the time are the ones who are looking and reading and watching. And so watching that grow and understanding that that's all that matters, you know, and like we had talked about earlier with being a mom, you know, I remember vividly having the kids and seeing them for the first time. And that feeling you kind of get of like, okay. And I think like with Britt and on their journey and when they had their top surgery, I got to experience that all over again. So, you know, I went with them to get their surgery and went in there when they took the bandages off and seeing them see themselves the way I saw them when they were born. Done. It was like, It's like, to me, it's like, that's who they were. And the way that they looked in the mirrors, I remember the way that I looked at them. So I think when people say like choices, whatever, decisions, that's what it's all about. It's just that happiness and that joy.
Yeah.
And loving them unconditionally.
Unconditionally, y'all. Well, I am so happy that you've shared your story here, and that you don't do it just here. Like, you willingly are open to talking to any parent who's going through this situation. And so I just you really are a mom. You're a moms now. You know what I'm saying?
But we need to be. More of us need to be. You know, and we need dads. Because, you know, a lot of kids don't have their dads. So we need parents, family.
Well, I will put Yvette's information in the description if you ever want to reach out to her, have any questions or any resources. Please do. Please reach out to Yvette. Cheers. Thanks for coming over. You get to take all this home, by the way, to your family. You got to share it with your family. Cheers. Just like, oh my God. Are you excited to show that TikTok?
I know. Kids are like, what are you doing?